You can just ad lib for a second whilst
Do some scatting. Skibidi.
is there a jazz scene here?
Not really.
Hello, welcome, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is the Study Success Blueprint. Hello, my name is Matthew Mace. This is the Study Success Blueprint. I have with me today Anil, Kottam, and John Porterfield. We're going to talk about their practice and what they do as independent researchers. We'll first start out, what's exciting you today?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's coming on grant deadline season for us. So next month, starting March 1st, we're going to be writing 5 proposals to the NIH. So it's kind of exciting, and we live in exciting times, kind of curse way, because the NIH is so all over the place right now. But that's essentially how we build our business.
So earlier today, we had a meeting trying to decide which of the 5 or 6 grant ideas we should proceed with. And that's kind of exciting, looking at the pros and cons of each idea, how feasible it is, how practical it is given the current climate. To a certain extent, it's like being a VC fund where you're vetting multiple ideas and deciding which ones to back and which ones to pursue. And hopefully, we still have qualified people to review them in the government now.
That brings me on to the loaded question we ask you, which is, how is the level of collaboration?
You mean like between universities and us?
All of it.
All of it? That's a good question. So right now, commercialization grants are somewhat not affected. SBIRs, which are the kinds of grants that we write, are to private companies that want to try and make a profit. So we're working on late stage, not early research kinds of things. The kinds of things that have come out in the government about reducing indirects and all of this other stuff that's happening, it doesn't specifically call out businesses like ours. That's not true for institutes of higher education, which were basically called out in that big indirect squash. All of the ones that I have dealt with have basically said, we're just doing everything as normal. Everyone is completely still writing grants from an academic perspective. Professors, clinicians, everyone that I talk to is just ready to work. They're still ready to collaborate. It's not really affecting them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this belief that this may not be a long-term problem, and eventually, common sense is going to prevail and people will come to a sort of an agreement on a middle ground. So it doesn't make sense to drop all collaborative research and grant-funded research at this point.
Yeah.
It's good to continue business as usual and then see how things work out, over the next couple of months.
It sounds like experience words, Anil, like, okay, things will come back to the senses at some point.
Right.
But people still want to work with you?
Yeah, as of now, we haven't seen anything that would indicate otherwise. We still have people approaching us with grant ideas, wanting us to try and get federal funding for their ideas and work together with them. And it's the same with individual inventors and university researchers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will say it kind of depends who you are in a university as to how it might affect you. When you talk about indirect rates, those are like the funds you use to keep the lights on, like to pay the rent. And then we tend to use indirects as well to write proposals. And then also for G&A, like, paying your accountants and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to a business like ours, writing an SBIR subcontract to a university, it's actually better if they have a lower indirect rate because the person that's doing the work gets more of the money.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a $50,000 subcontract to write and they have a 65% overhead rate,
Mm-hmm.
then the person who's doing the work only gets $20,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if they actually go immediately to a 15% indirect rate, the person who does the work now has like $40K, to actually do something. And that's better.
What do you think the impact on tech could be in development from universities? You said
so a lot of the universities have used indirect money to purchase large pieces of capital equipment that's not specific to certain grants. So if the indirects are cut, there won't be any more capital equipment purchases.
Mm-hmm.
So new grants moving forward could eventually need new equipment, which they have no way of funding. So it will affect technical research, but it may be several months to a couple of years before we start to see that, because they can currently use the capital equipment that's already been purchased.
Yeah. If I read that back, there could be a period of stagnation at the point of obsolescence of current capital equipment.
Correct.
We've purchased equipment under indirects, like our 3D printer out
Mhm.
there. That's used to support a lot of different projects that we make, because it doesn't make sense to start doing plastic injection molding early on in the development process. So now, instead of having that for all of our grants, we would have to propose a grant specifically requiring that 3D printer and
Mhm.
then claim it as a direct cost.
Mm.
And it also takes some of the money away that you're planning to use to actually do the work.
Yeah.
Which is not great.
Tell us a little bit more about the business. We first introduced it about 3 years ago. It seemed a very alien concept that this isolated business exists, but it needs to exist to drive innovation forward without additional commercial pressure of doing design in-house. Dev shops don't particularly work for some things you're inventing.
Yeah, definitely. I guess our business model sort of exists to take really early ideas into mid-stage or all the way through commercialization. You know, the NIH funds a lot of research, and the biggest grants in the academic world are things like R01s. So you get like a $5 million R01. You do this really complicated and risky project, and at the end of it, you answer some fundamental question about science. And then all the grad students write papers, and then they get graduated, and then they drop the problem. And it never becomes a reality changing medical practice. And that's really what the SBIR process, small business innovation and research. So the company that we have essentially allows us to propose solutions to medical problems using our expertise as engineers. And that's really what gets us excited. We like the research. One of the advantages of doing SBIRs like this is that it's all non-dilutive. So you want to make a medical device company, go out and you raise a bunch of money and you give some equity away. And then eventually you turn that into a product after a long development. And that's one traditional way to do it. But sometimes mid-sized medical device companies, after they get their first investment, they drop a lot of their research and sort of focus on something that's going to make them more money. And that's part of where our company plugs in. We typically take some of those ideas that are going to fall by the wayside, and we propose research grants that help us to commercialize other ideas that may be parallel, typically with the business that's trying to get funding. But to give you some ideas, like the breadth of the projects we work on right now, we have 5 funded projects. 3 of them are actually related to cardiac technology. 2 of them are class 3, like implant devices. One of them is a handheld that we've got on the desk here. The 4th project is a drug device combination. It's a new type of mesh nebulizer that changes the particle size as you breathe for better deposition. And then one of them is a fintech app for people who have dementia and their caregivers who are often unpaid and untrained
Mhm.
to help them with their financial planning. So we pretty much just write about what we're interested in. And then we try and find people who would be interested in making manufacturing and selling that technology.
Mhm.
And that's how the business works.
Yeah, so companies like ours help to take university research that is typically funded through the STTR, NIH STTR process. And at the point where a significant amount of the research has been de-risked, we would take that and then do the initial proof of concepts, animal studies, de-risk the entire technology.
Yeah.
So we would essentially be bridging academic research to a full-fledged commercial medical
Mhm.
entity.
So that's a lot of different fields. What's your backgrounds, guys?
So my background is biomedical engineering. All of my degrees, that it's bachelor's, master's, and PhD, were all in biomedical engineering, specifically cardiovascular devices. So that's why I really enjoy the kind of projects that we work on here, because any medical device that operates on a battery, I'm all excited to work on it.
And yeah, I have 3 degrees in electrical engineering. I started out in computer engineering, and then I came to Texas, and that's where I met Anil. We got our PhDs in the same laboratory, but
Okay.
at different fields. Mine's electrical and his is biomedical. But in practice now, we've sort of swapped. Anil actually designs all the circuit boards and all of the circuits.
Yeah.
And I do some firmware programming, but I'm doing mostly the IRB writing, IACOOK writing, proposal winning.
I suddenly felt like the least intelligent person in the room with my 1 degree.
Well, we also have Tim, who's in the other room here, is a mechanical engineering PhD with large language model experience, which is not a mechanical thing, but he just has a hobby in that. And then John, who's in the UK right now, is computational cardiac electrophysiology with a math background, but is also a good writer. So
You get cool projects, like you said, Anil, right? Have pacemaker in a can, you can break it up, you can see what the circuits are, you can redesign it. This sounds like a dream job, no?
It is. You get to tinker with all these cool medical devices and get paid to do this and hopefully make money for other people in the process. So that's great.
and you never really get tired of it, because if you want to learn a new field, then you just write about the new field, and then you build the team that helps you actually make it happen. And that's really, I think that's the key to medical device success in general, not just in proposals, but having a team that's going to be successful is about plausibly having the right people in the room all the time that committed to the project. And that's essentially one of the keys to winning these proposals in the SBIR land is, building that collaborative team.
When you take a device from a university, as you said, what are the markers of success that you think, yes, this is a great project, that this will run and be successful and be delivered on time and hopefully on budget?
We typically look at how well thought out the idea is. So the technology has to be fairly de-risked. It can't be a completely out there moonshot idea, because that's not the purpose of an SBIR grant. So we look at the team behind it. We look at how valid the technology is. We look at all of the publications. And if once we are convinced that this is viable technology, then we look at our skill set internally and see if we have the skills and the aptitude to work on this project. So a lot of times we find that we have the aptitude to work on the project. It's really interesting, but we may be lacking in certain technical aspects of the project, in which case we work with the collaborator that brought the idea to us, and we see if they can lend us some of their expertise, or we could collaborate with them or consult with them to move the technical aspects of the project along. So that's one thing. We need to make sure that we have the resources in place to get to the endpoint. Then we look at the commercial potential, because at the end of the day, we could build a cool product, but if the market is not big enough or it doesn't differentiate well enough from competing products, then it doesn't make sense to pursue this. So once we're convinced of all this, then we write up a grant proposal, and that's where grantsmanship comes in, where we translate our excitement at the project and how comfortable we feel and how good we think the product will do in the marketplace. We have to translate all that into our grant application. So that's where grantsmanship comes in. And I think that's a fairly unique skill set. So we've had a pretty successful past 6 or 7 years where we've been able to keep this grant funding pipeline going, able to fund really good ideas that we think would eventually make it to the marketplace and help as many people as possible.
And actually, the incubator that we're part of, it has a number of different companies that are like us. Most of them are in Minneapolis, which, makes sense. A lot more sense than Austin, Texas, probably. But that model has been around for over 40 years. So they started doing this when it was paper grants that you were sending out and springing extra money for color and stuff like that. I think I'll add to what Anil said to say that, maybe one of the keys to a good idea is being able to show that you've either done it before or that you have the expertise in-house. Let me just take a step back and talk about success rates and things like that. At the NIH, they publish the success rates for people that submit grants. The current national average is 1 in 10. Ours is something like 1 in 4. And that's because of, all of the experience that we've got. So it's split into 2 grants. Phase 1 is feasibility, and it's a smaller grant. And phase 2 is commercialization, and it's about $2 million or so. We have a 1 in 4 success rate on all of our grants, but we have a 100% success rate on phase 2s. And the reason for that is because our team accomplished something on paper that was funded by the government for phase 1. And so when we're ready for phase 2, the way that we write it is everything. I mean, we basically can say, this went really, really well. The government spent their money on something that's going to become a real product. And now we're just asking for the extension of that same project.
Yeah, it's a completely de-risk. process.
And that's really the biggest difference between an academic grant and a commercialization grant. An academic grant is there to answer a question.
Mhm.
And so failure is not being able to answer any questions.
Mhm.
And so a lot of those people will write, and so if this doesn't work, then our backup plan is this. And
Yeah.
if this doesn't work, then our backup plan is this. And that's why we'll answer the questions of science.
Mhm.
But when we write that there is no failure.
Yeah.
We are accomplished engineers that are highly published in our field, and we're applying our knowledge to medicine. And so we have a collaborator who knows the medical question, knows the medical answer, but just doesn't have the engineering know-how to get it done. And so the collaborators we bring in are often clinicians that can enroll a clinical trial, understand the problem very deeply, CROs, animal lab techs, people with high dollar equipment that are in universities that are necessary to actually form the research. But there's no if this doesn't work part in a commercialization grant. It's this will work, and we're very sure because we're just applying this old technology to this new field for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah. And if it doesn't work, there's no company.
Right. And if it's not innovative, then it won't be funded either. So,
Yeah.
There has to be some element of like a eureka moment that really differentiates the good ideas from the bad.
So I've got a different question in a second, but just touching on that innovative, that isn't an incremental improvement on something that already exists, just to be clear.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a losing idea to propose that you're going to do the same thing as someone else but cheaper.
Yeah.
For example, unless something new, completely new has come along that just blows it away. I mean, like you can make it for 2% of the cost, or you can make it for 2% of the power, or something like that. And what you're doing is applying something that's fundamentally different in the science or in the sensor or in the system that changes that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it has to be something that impacts healthcare. So even if we make something that's going to be cheaper than what's out there, as long as making it less expensive significantly improves the access to healthcare, that would still be considered a very viable project. So at the end of the day, everything that we do that is funded should go back to improving the health outcomes of the American population.
Yeah.
So incremental improvements may not always accomplish this, but there are exceptions to this rule.
Talking about the institutes, I think the throwaway comment is that the XYZ institutes, right? And at the NIH, we were discussing before we jumped on here that some agencies are newer, some agencies are older. There's still a fundamental NIH. Just walk me through what are the types of agencies there? What has come new? Where should you be pitching your ideas? Is it adult? Is it pediatric? Is it heart and lung? What's the landscape like?
I think it's changing quite a bit right now. I'm not actually really sure if all of the institutes are still around, but there used to be 26?
27, I believe.
27 institutes. So speaking to the ones that existed a month ago, I can say we've applied to a lot of different ones. We've been funded for a lot of different ones. Our current projects are funded by National Institutes on Aging. We have 2 there. We have 2 with the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is our wheelhouse. That's what we did our grad school stuff in, mostly cardiac. And then another one that we have is through the NIBIB, the National Institute on
Bioengineering, Imaging, and biosensors, I believe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure. So these programs are sort of like...
Do they know as well?
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, these programs are essentially under the umbrella of the NIH. They're all part of the NIH. And, at the top of every grant proposal, there's a program officer who's responsible for administering a portfolio of research projects. And, the whole submission process is kind of long. If we submitted something today and we won it in the first try, it would take 9 months for us to see any money.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes through a 2-round review process. One is the scientific review, which is staffed by some standing committee members. And then they also ask people like us who have won a lot of proposals to sit in and sort of review grants.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, the scientific review council gives you a score. And that score kind of generally ranks you with all of the other proposals that are there. And then you wait for another couple of months. And then they have something called a council meeting, which really there's not a lot of published details about. It's kind of a shadowy organization. We don't know how many people are on it. We don't know who's part of it. But basically,
Is
the
that the
funding,
Freemason's house?
yeah, the Freemasons' house. I imagine people dressed in like cloaks with like ropes around their waist.
Mhm.
But basically, all they do is their institute, and the institutes here are NHLBI, NIA, that kind of thing. They look at how much money they have, and then they look at the ranking of grants, and then they draw a line. And
Mhm.
everybody below the line gets a grant, and
Mhm.
everybody above the line doesn't get a grant. It has to
Mhm.
try again. And then the program officer has some leeway for the guys that are right around the funding cutoff.
Mhm. Mhm.
Most institutes don't publish what their cutoff is. So you have to guess, or you have to have a lot of experience like we do.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of the secret sauce to doing 14 proposals around and then being a part of a group with 6 other companies that do the same thing. We have a pretty good idea of what the actual funding cutoff lines are and where the targets should be.
Does it work? Does the system work?
It did.
Yeah. So the NIH is one of the systems that works purely based on merit. It's not a question of who you know, how much money you've donated, where you went to school. Everything is purely merit based, and everything works according to very well defined timelines. So if you submit a grant, you know exactly when it's going to be reviewed, you know when the scores are coming out, you know when the funding is going to start. So from a company perspective, it's very helpful to have all that information so you can, plan accordingly, plan hiring processes, plan all of your budgeting. And I don't think that's the case with a lot of the other funding institutes in the federal government. The NIH, I have to say, is one of the better funded and better organized institutions that I've come across.
I guess another way to say does it work is to take a case study. Our first grant that we won was an idea that an electrophysiologist had that our professor at UT helped to sort of de-risk when we wrote about it.
Mhm.
It's a medical device identifier. It's an embedded system that's a handheld. It gives you the brand of an implanted cardiac device.
Mhm.
So, the elevator pitch is you go to the emergency room in the middle of the night, you have this implanted device, so the doctors can see it, but you didn't bring the card with you that says what brand it is. Well, the rep that's supposed to do the interrogation of that device has to be called in order for that to actually happen. And so basically, they have to go and do what's called a chart dive. They just start looking for your information, trying to figure out what your initial diagnosis was, who your doctor was, and then therefore kind of get back to what the device brand is.
Mhm.
And there doesn't exist a device that can tell you in like 20 seconds what the implant is. And
Mhm.
that's what this device does. That's what
Let's
we
hear.
proposed. And the way it does it is by spoofing the calls of each of the individual big systems that are like suitcase sized computers, and then listening for a response. So, the guy that invented it's an electrophysiologist. He's not going to quit his day job. He would be a terrible CEO. He's got lots of money, but really not enough time to do any of this stuff. The professor that helped do the de-risking of it has a day job. He's a tenured professor at the University of Texas, world-renowned embedded systems teacher. He's not got the bandwidth to actually take this all the way either.
Mhm.
So they basically talked with us. We wrote a proposal and we won it. And then we won another proposal, and then we won another proposal. And so far, we've won over $4 million in non-dilutive funding.
Mhm.
And this year, we got accepted into the STEP program at the FDA, and we'll be submitting a de novo Class 2 approval for
Mhm.
this device.
Mhm.
And there's no dilutive funding. The doctor that owned the idea, came up with it, owns 100% of it.
Mhm.
He pays us for a license for all of the things that we do.
Mhm.
We're actually working by a contract manufacturer in
Yeah.
Fort Worth. And they have done a ton of engineering work on it. It's an ISO 13485 certified lab. By the time we're done with the project, this could be on the market and helping
Mhm.
people. And so that's your tax dollars at work, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the definition of it working.
Yeah.
And at a cost of a little over $4 million. So getting a medical device product from idea to a fully vetted and FDA approved device for a little over $4 million is an extremely efficient use of tax dollars.
It's more efficient than my old company. You talked about, being a VC. This device doesn't get funded, right? In venture capital.
So the VCs may have invested in it, but it would have cost them significantly more than $4 million to get to the point where we are now. There's a lot of uncertainty with regards to how successful they would have been, especially with the team that we have together. along with the professors that are involved in it.
So you're just saying you're amazing, Anil?
Well,
I'll say
I didn't say
Anil's amazing. That's true.
No, I mean, like I've met you guys before. I think it's impressive what you do. You know, we take the medical device identifier. That's a problem that's existed for 20 years or so.
Yep.
And nobody has come together and tackled it. It's a hard problem to fix. It seems niche, but it's not. It's not niche at all from a commercial standpoint. But
That's actually a really great point. I think it never would have happened without SBIR funding. And the reason is because the big companies that produce these implantable devices are incentivized to not work with each other. And they don't interoperate with anybody else's device, then they tend to get more market share.
Mhm.
They're sort of siloed in that way.
Yeah.
It takes a third party, sort of being creative to try and get around all of that. Could they all make a medical device identifier? Absolutely. They could. But
Yep.
they're not going to, and that's why taxpayer money exists to fund research like this and create businesses.
Yeah. What's the other cool thing you've worked on this year?
Well, that's this one over here. It's the Smart Nebulizer grant that we've got. This is an interesting idea from the School of Pharmacology at University of Texas. A friend of mine came up with it. He's a postdoc still there. The elevator pitch for it is that nebulization of drugs is like a standard platform, right? I'm an asthmatic for 36 years. I've taken these types of nebulizers. They're a treatment machine that you basically breathe in for 20 minutes, and it has a jet that sort of creates particles of liquid that
Mhm.
you inhale. Asthmatics, COPD, like lots of different diseases, take these types of things. So the crux of it is that medicine getting to your lungs is actually what you're trying to do with a nebulization.
Mhm.
And getting it to stick specifically, which they call deposition. And deposition of medication is dependent really on two things. It's the size of the particle
Mhm.
and it's the speed that you breathe it in. So if it's really small, for example, like a vape pen,
Mhm.
you breathe in and then you breathe out and this huge cloud of smoke comes out. Well, that's
Yeah.
all of the smoke
Yeah.
that should have been deposited.
Mhm.
If it were a medication, then you wouldn't have been getting any of the medication,
Mhm.
really. So it's inefficient. If you have a really big particle and you breathe fast, then it sticks to the back of your throat and then ends up getting swallowed eventually.
Yeah.
So for a long time, they've just wasted medication by letting people breathe it out over and over again. And so if you're breathing out, you're not getting any medication. You're just spraying it all throughout the room. So our device creates 3 different particle sizes, and it reacts to a flow meter of how you're breathing to deliver the right size particle at the right time.
Mhm.
And we're not aware of any other device on the market that does that. So it's actually kind of extremely novel. But we've done the proof of concept. We did a deposition study on healthy volunteers in phase 1. It was
Mhm.
during COVID, which was really hard because it's a nebulized particle and you're spraying stuff all into the room and it's COVID. And so that was difficult.
That was really safe.
Yeah. But we got it IRB approved and, that was at UT Health Science Center. And then that professor, the clinician, moved to Stanford. And so we're doing the phase 2 at Stanford. Still working with UT Austin. They all receive subcontracts under the grant that we've won.
Mhm.
But we're doing all of the engineering work.
Yeah, so that's the advantage of, collaborative work with the university. So we do all of the device development, the drug development happens at the College of Pharmacology, and then we come together and make a big, beautiful medical device.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And neither of you had the skill sets to do the whole thing, right?
Correct.
Right. That kind of actually brings it full circle with the direct and indirect conversation. The most expensive piece of equipment that we have was a direct purchase on this grant
Okay.
because we literally don't have any other drug device combo products. And so this is the only program that we have that uses that equipment. We could have spent indirect money on it if we had flush indirect accounts. But, part of the reason why it's so much easier for a small business like ours to sort of charge things and not waste money is that we don't have that many projects. So we're not
Yeah.
supporting this huge infrastructure. And, at the end of the day, when we sell this or license this product, we may actually sell a machine too.
I guess this conversation is about efficiency or the lack thereof, right? In research. And I think if I'm a startup medical device manufacturer or a drug combo manufacturer and I'm looking at doing development, it's a very inefficient and effective process. I can spend a lot of money, VC money, trying to figure out, how do we manufacture it? How do we do this? how do we know about you, and how do we know that these programs exist, and how do we know more efficient ways to deploy capital?
Yeah, so we've been doing this long enough now that a lot of people who come to us hear about us through word of mouth. We haven't advertised, but we are also a pretty small, lean group here.
Mhm.
So there's only so many grants that we could take on at any given time. So I think we are at the sweet spot where we would appreciate a few more ideas coming our way, but we need to balance that against the resources that we currently have.
I mean, I guess anybody who has the internet can find out that you can apply for an SBIR grant. And one of the questions we sometimes get is, why don't I just do it myself?
Yeah.
And, that's when the whole 1 in 10 success rate thing comes about. We get a lot of people that approach us because they've written 3 SBIR grants and they haven't been funded. And they come to us and they say, hey, we hear you've got a really good success rate. How come? Well, 3 out of 10 is, you have to write 10 in order to get one. That's
Yeah.
why we write 14 a year. Then you eventually get better, but most people who want the grant money aren't really interested in writing proposals.
Yeah.
And so we get some people who are frustrated with the process, and then they come to us and they realize that we don't cost any money.
Yeah.
All they have to do is convince us that it's a fun idea for us to work on and that we have a high likelihood of winning.
Yeah.
And then we write it for free. We're sort of like a bulk business from that standpoint. We write so many grants, but we're not necessarily married to one idea.
Yeah.
Which is part of why doing this as a startup doesn't make as much sense, because you only have the one idea.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But this is a lot more fun, right?
It is. So this way we get to write the grants and do the work,
Yeah.
as opposed to a lot of other grant writing companies that write the grants for you, but that's all they do. Once you win the grant, it's on you. They don't provide any other support or any of the other engineering resources.
Very often they'll take some off the top and leave you with less money than you need to finish. And that's just not a great deal.
Well, I think that's the point. And we debate, and I debated in my last company, the value of a grant writing company, because I'm going to lose 5%. In some cases, I'm going to lose 7-8% of my grant, which either I overvalued the grant to make sure I could cover that cost, or I'm shortchanged, right? And you don't win the grant because, if I'm reading back to you, you win a grant because you have the right team
To execute, yeah.
and you have a good idea that serves a purpose that benefits, human health. And it can't be iterative. And if you tick all those boxes, then you get government support for what you're doing. I mean, that sounds like a good deal for the taxpayer.
Yeah, definitely. It's not something they really get to vote much about, I guess, but
Yeah.
but it is still a good deal, and that's part of the reason why the NIH is still the biggest science organization in the world.
And the biggest funder of biomedical research in the world.
And science is going to continue, right?
Yes, it will.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
There's always times. I think I heard this quote the other day. It's like, it's always the times. Like you go, oh man, the times we live in, it's always the times, right? There's, ups and downs. And I think within research, there's ups and downs too. I think 5 years ago, we thought computer science was a stagnating field. And then suddenly LLMs changed the whole landscape of data science, right? And it probably happens in engineering.
True. Yeah.
So it's just write it out. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I think at this point we have our training and we'll always be able to apply our training to problems. I think we're pretty well suited as a company to survive whatever's going to happen here. But even if we aren't, applying engineering to problems in any field is a lucrative thing to do. It's funny that you said the times are always the times. When I went to college, Napster was really popular and I wanted to go into computer science. And so I realized at that point that if I went into computer science and I wrote code, that someone would just steal it eventually. And I was too dumb to understand that actually network security was really a hot topic back then. And so that's where computer scientists that made top dollar would go.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I went into computer engineering, because I thought if I make hardware, then nobody can steal it. But then 3D printers came out and now it really is just about how how deep you are into your field and how you can apply it to other problems.
I guess that, bringing it around innovation, and we talk about moats, always technology moats, like that is innovation. That is ways to make a good idea that's going to benefit society, that is fundable, a commercial success, because there's a core technology which needs developing, you bring forward, and it's hard to develop stuff. So we do need government support.
Definitely.
Yep.
I appreciate you guys, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah. Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks, Matt.
I would like to thank my wonderful guests, Anil and John, for joining me today. If you like this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe and listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. You can listen back to our last episode with Dr. Andrew Sau, where we spoke about the role of building teams, and look forward to upcoming episodes with Kunjan Bhatt and Alana Rice from Austin Hart. So with that, I can leave you today. Speak to you very soon. I've been Matthew Mace, and this is the Study Success Blueprint. Good. All right. I appreciate you. Any passing thoughts before we disappear?
Well, slightly off topic, but just when the country is taken on an anti-vaccine mandate, we find out that people are dying of measles in West Texas.
Yeah.
So
That's true. It's been all over the news over here. Maybe we should come up with something to help prevent that.
I was asked before I flew over here if I needed to get a shot. I went to Bangalore recently, didn't need shots, but I thought about it for coming to Texas.
yeah. So let's hope that's not a sign of things to come, but we're all staying positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Man. The times are the times.
Yeah.
Skibidi. Stop.